Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, 4 days after a school shooting in a private school in Kumba, southwestern Cameroon, locals are still traumatized by the loss of at least 7 young lives. Authorities blame English-speaking separatists for the bloodshed. Also, opposition parties in Tanzania accuse police of shooting at least 9 people in various incidents linked to unrest and alleged fraud ahead of Wednesday's presidential election. The UN said it's worried about reports of intimidation of opponents of President John Magufuli. And in the countdown to this Saturday's presidential poll in Ivory Coast, politicians publicly emphasized the need for harmony between all Ivorians. But recent bouts of intercommunal violence suggest the country still has a long way to go. But first, the Cameroonian community, shaken by the school shooting in Kumba over the weekend, held a vigil on Tuesday for the 7 children lost in the attack. The pupils had been having catch-up classes on Saturday when gunmen burst in. The government blamed Anglophone secessionist militants for the bloodshed. Our correspondents tell us more.
The traces of blood are still visible on the floor and walls of this classroom in Kumba. Personal objects abandoned amidst the panic as children fled gunmen. Around 7 students aged 9 to 14 were killed in the massacre. Days later, the shocked community gathered in front of the school to offer songs and prayers for the victims. The violence shocked Cameroon and has left locals traumatized.
I am very angry since on Saturday. I have not eaten. I cannot sleep because of this war, this nonsense crisis, this ungodly war. We are suffering. Why can't we be killing our own selves, our own brothers and sisters? Why? Why should we kill our own children? Please, I beg. I just need my peace.
Over a dozen of children were wounded. Some are being treated in this hospital. This 13-year-old was shot through her stomach. Still terrified of her attackers, she wants to remain anonymous.
I was inside the class. And I see one person down with a gun before I want to bend down. They shoot all of us. Then I don't want to come to school. I'm afraid.
Her mother prays by her bedside. So far, no one has claimed responsibility for the school shooting, though officials say armed English-speaking separatists who called for a school boycott are responsible.
It's very painful. As a mother, it's very painful. I don't know. I just pray that God should take care of my daughter, because it's the only one that I'm depending on. It's the only one that can heal my daughter.
An investigation is underway. Meanwhile, grieving parents struggle to move forward. Many had hoped to send their children back to school this year. Academic schedules have been severely disrupted since Cameroon's Anglophone crisis turned violent in 2017. However, the country's most vulnerable members appear to be paying the highest price for the ongoing conflict.
That report by our team in Cameroon. Well, opposition parties in Tanzania say that police shot at least 9 people in various incidents linked to unrest and alleged fraud ahead of Wednesday's presidential election. Police have denied this, but the UN has said that it is worried about reports of intimidation and attacks on opponents of President John Magufuli, who will be running for a second term on Wednesday. Witnesses claim that at least 2 people were killed in the northeastern town of Nyamongo. Internet service was strangled ahead of the polls, and our team wasn't allowed into the country to cover the vote, but they report from over the border on alleged shootings in the town of Pemba on Zanzibar.
Tanzanians are due to vote tomorrow in general elections. However, already several people have been killed in election-related violence. In the Indian Ocean's archipelago of Zanzibar, the main opposition, ACT party, there says 3 people were shot dead by security forces last night. Opposition party officials say the unrest began when residents of the island of Pemba complained that the early voting ballot papers had already been marked. Today, the leader of ACT, Saif Sharif Hamad, was arrested after he tried to vote in the early polls. His party says he wanted to vote early because they suspect the ruling party will try to rig tomorrow's elections. The electoral campaigns in Tanzania, both on the mainland and in the semi-autonomous Zanzibar, have been marred by violence and intimidation. Rights groups have complained of a crackdown on the media and the freedom of speech. The opposition complained that security forces disrupted rallies and prevented their candidates from campaigning freely. The government has not allowed any international media to come to Tanzania and cover the polls. Soon after coming to power 5 years ago, the incumbent President John Magufuli banned political rallies and is accused by his critics of being intolerant to dissent. His government also passed a series of restrictive media and civil society laws. Election campaigns have taken place with little regard to the COVID-19 pandemic. The government stopped releasing COVID-19 data in April, and Magufuli controversially declared the country COVID-free. He said thanks to faith and prayer. Election observers are also concerned about whether these elections will be free or fair. They've highlighted what they call constant efforts to frustrate the opposition, which includes tear gassing their supporters at rallies, the exclusion of candidates, and the hampering of free reporting by the media. Accusations that the government has repeatedly denied.
Mkelwa Sheshwayu there for us will be covering the Tanzanian elections from over the border in Kenya. Now, after weeks of protests against police brutality in Nigeria, on Tuesday, the judicial panel began investigating claims of abuses by officers and the shooting of demonstrators in Lagos last week. Nicholas Chamin has more.
Nigeria has just experienced some of its worst street violence since the end of military rule in 1999. Protests against the widely feared police unit SARS, the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, began on October the 8th. They turned violent on October the 20th when witnesses said the military opened fire on peaceful protesters. Dozens of people have been killed across the country. In Lagos, the situation is now calmer than in other regions, but demonstrators remain bitter. Among them is Ephraim, who returned to Nigeria recently after having spent many years abroad.
There's a storm brewing inside of me. I don't know where to put it. I don't know what to do with it. Maybe for the first time, young people are willing to stand up against tyranny, because that's what this is.
The government officially disbanded the SARS police unit on October the 11th. On Friday, President Muhammadu Buhari said the protests had been hijacked by thugs.
Many lives have been lost, and a number of public and private properties completely destroyed or vandalized. It is unfortunate that the initial genuine and well-intended protest of the youth in the parts of the country against us has been hijacked and misdirected.
On Tuesday, a judicial panel began an inquiry into the shooting of peaceful protesters last week. But many Nigerians say they are skeptical that the security forces will be held to account.
Well, the EU's backed Nigeria's finance minister's bid to become the first African head of the World Trade Organization. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was the first woman in her country to hold her post. The Economist is a favourite to take over at the WTO when the institution announces its new Director General next month. The other candidate still in the race is South Korea's Trade Minister Yoo Myung-hee. Judges of Malawi's Constitutional Court have been awarded an international award for overturning rigged presidential elections this year. The UK's Chatham House Prize goes to those who have made the most significant contribution to the improvement of international relations. In an historic ruling in February, the 5 judges annulled the 2019 vote that would have meant the re-election of the then incumbent Peter Mutharika. New elections were ordered, which were won by opposition leader Lazarus Chakwera. Time now for Ivory Coast Election Watch. The countdown to this Saturday's presidential poll, all sides are championing reconciliation. They publicly emphasize the need for harmony and justice for all Ivorians. But recent protests have occasionally degenerated into intercommunal violence, suggesting that the country still has a long way to go. Sam Bradpeace sent us this report.
Yupagong is a cultural melting pot of more than 1 million people. It is a bastion of Laurent Gbagbo's FPI party and was a site of massacre during the 2010-11 post-electoral crisis. In August, tension flared once again after President Alassane Ouattara announced that he would stand for a third term. Protests have been rapidly suppressed by police. In a bid to avoid a repeat of 2011, mediation efforts in this volatile neighborhood have intensified.
En 2010-2011, là, après la crise, chacun de vous a fait un effort pour accepter l'autre. Parce qu'on s'est mis ensemble pour travailler. Mais aujourd'hui, les hommes politiques, les mêmes encore, sont en train de créer une situation où les victimes commencent à avoir peur.
Gathered here are Christians and Muslims who were all somehow affected by the crisis. One lost their leg, another their son. Never again, that is Diaby's key message.
Faisons en sorte que l'acquis qu'on a eu là, qui fait qu'on vit ensemble encore actuellement, soit préservé.
The group supports the idea, but many are disillusioned and bitter because of unkept promises. The reconciliation process was supposed to have two main pillars, the first being compensation for the victims.
Jusque-là, nous, on n'a pas reçu de compensation. Et voilà pourquoi j'insiste pour dire, jusque-là, la réconciliation va mal.
On est laissé pour compte, comme le frère le disait. Il n'y a rien eu. Ils n'ont ni fait la réconciliation, c'est-à-dire pour qu'on fasse, pour que les gens s'entendent. Ils s'enseignent ensemble, ils marchent ensemble, ils jouent ensemble. Ils n'ont rien fait.
The second pillar of reconciliation? Justice. The amnesty for perpetrators introduced by Ouattara in 2018 drew a mixed reaction. Some victims of violence saw it as betrayal. Others said it didn't go far enough.
Il y a encore des détenus, non seulement militaires et civils, qui sont incarcérés depuis la crise post-électorale jusqu'à aujourd'hui. Alors on continue de se battre et on continue de réclamer la libération de ces personnes. Et nous disons que pour une réconciliation vraie, il faut libérer toutes ces personnes qui sont incarcérées.
It's difficult to judge exactly how well reconciliation is going in such a diverse country. Undoubtedly, though, the ghosts of the past continue to linger.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.
In 1909, Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe, fired by Zionist and socialist ideas, founded the first kibbutz on the shores of the Sea of Galilee in Palestine. Few will have imagined that 40 years later, more than 70,000 people will have joined their community-based movement of mutual aid and unity. Today, the kibbutz forms a central part of the Jewish settlements and the State of Israel, but its nature has changed over the years. With privatizations, conversions into holiday centres, what remains of the original ideal?
Revisited, presented by Stuart Norval on France 24 and France24.com.